We all know the Swiss Army knife is the gold standard of pocket knives. But did you know they come with hidden tools and ways to make them even better? Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the garden on a glorious summer's day. It's actually a little bit cooler today and we really like that. My name's Hugh and together with my stunning wife Fiona, we live and work on a rural smallholding here in Lincolnshire in the UK. Now, a tool that I use every single day is a Swiss Army knife. I think they are just invaluable. They're not terribly expensive and they're incredibly useful. Not just for cutting a piece of string to tie up a tomato or cutting open a feed sack for the chickens, but because they have a range of other tools that are incredibly useful. I love the scissors, which are strong enough to cut cable ties. I love the little wood saws, which are great for a bit of impromptu pruning, and the screwdrivers come into use all the time. No, they're not a replacement for a full toolkit, but what they are is something that you can carry on you all the time to do small jobs that don't require major tools. But you can make them even better, right? Modern Swiss Army knives, not every model I've looked at in the old ones, but the newer ones often come with a pin, but they don't tell you that it's there or what it's for. Now for me, having a pin on me at all times is incredibly useful because I'm always picking up splinters in my hands, and having a pin and the supplied set of little tweezers is great for getting rid of them. A few models also have a pen, which I think is just invaluable to always have a pen on you, but not all. But a lot of the other models can be adapted to take that pen. And lastly, you can replace the standard red scales with lots of other colours, and I like the yellow ones because they're super bright and I'm an idiot, and when I put the knife down I can find it easily with something that's almost fluorescent on the scales. So today I'm going to show you how to make your knife like that so that you've got those extra hidden features available to you. First hidden tool is a pin. If you look under the corkscrew on the back, you may just be able to see a tiny little hole. Sometimes there's a screwdriver, not a corkscrew. And on this, which is a more modern version of the knife, it actually comes supplied with a pin in the hole. Just there, you can see the little head. Now, they can be a bit tricky to get out, and sometimes you have to hook a fingernail under the pin head, but we'll talk a bit more about that later on. There's a better way of doing it. But there is definitely a designed slot for a pin. Let's show you briefly how the pen works. Now, for a long time, all the standard size Swiss Army knives would come with a set of what they call mini tools, which is a little pair of tweezers, which I find tremendously helpful, and on the other side, a small plastic toothpick. But a while ago they updated those, and what you find now is, yes, they still come with a useful set of mini tweezers, and on the other side you've still got the plastic toothpick. But if you look above the toothpick slot, you'll find another slot, and this only happens on a few knives, but in that slot there is a small slim biro. Now here's a trick that I learned from Felix Immler's channel. I'll put a link down in the description. If you take that slim biro and you slot it underneath the little parcel hook on the back and close the parcel hook, you actually end up with a very comfortable pen to write with. Now the scales that hold the biro are called the plus scales, and they only come on a few knives, but you can fit them to any knife of that size, and that's what we're doing today. The other little mini tool that comes on the back is a small flat-headed screwdriver, which can be very useful for doing up terminals or small screws in spectacles. So let's look how we can replace the scales on our old knife. First thing to do is to take out any of these little mini tools. Now you can honestly just pry the old scales off. They are just a push fit, but they are quite hard and quite brittle. So I'm going to try and soften them first. And the way that I do that is to boil a kettle and put some hot, not quite boiling, but hot water into a bowl or a glass jug, and then I am literally going to drop the knife into that. I know that seems a bit alarming, but I promise you it's going to be absolutely fine, and the heat is going to soften up those old scales, make them much easier to remove intact. I'll leave it in there just for maybe 2 minutes, and obviously fish it out carefully. You don't want to give yourself a scald, and what I usually do is sort of hook it out with a long thin screwdriver, because we're going to need that in a minute. And the way that we get the scales off is to insert that long thin screwdriver, you could use a meat skewer or anything sort of thin and rigid, into one of the tool slots. Can you see how that's bending gently? And when they're cold, they don't do that. It's almost like more of a cracking motion. But with that screwdriver, we can easily pry off the old scales. They just push fit onto those 3 brass studs that you can see. Now, it's not strictly necessary, but while I've got the scales on, I'll generally give the knife a bit of a clean up, which means getting a stiff brush, clearing off all the dust and dirt, opening out the tools so that I can get into the crevices in the bottom where they attract pocket lints and bits of tree sap and other stuff, and get all of that cleaned out. If it's still wet, then I'll dry it off with a hairdryer or a hot air gun, and then I'm going to lubricate all the joints and pivots with a shot of WD-40, which will disperse the water and make sure that everything's moving really freely. So let's take a look at fitting the new set of scales. Now, if you want to fit one with the pen, you need to order what's called the plus scales, and the plus scales have 2 cutouts you can just see here in the top. One to take the toothpick, one to take the biro. And in fact, if we look at the inside, it's not just a cutout to slot them into, there are fully moulded slots to accept the pen, the toothpick, and even the pin. Now, to fit them, if you look at the knife, there are 3 brass studs on the side of the knife. And if you look at the scales below, there are 3 corresponding plastic sockets that will line up with and press over the brass studs. Now, I'm told that you can push these on with finger pressure alone, just by squeezing with your finger and thumb, and they have to snap over a ridge on the rim of that brass stud. I've got to be honest, my fingers aren't strong enough for that.
You have a woman's hand, my lord.
So while I can start getting the scales on, I can't quite fully seat them. So I use the carpenter's vise in the workshop. It's wood lined, but even then I'm going to put a bit of cloth or workshop towel over the scales to make sure I don't scratch or mark them. Put the knife between the jaws of the vise and just very gently close the jaws of the vise to fully snug those scales up to the metal. If I didn't have that, I'd put it between 2 flat pieces of wood and just lean on it with my body weight. I'm sure that would work absolutely fine. I am going to put one of those little screwdrivers into this knife because I find them really handy. But I'm not going to buy a pin from Swiss Army knives. Yes, you can get them to go in the slot. What I'm going to use is a dressmaker's pin with a brightly coloured head. Partly because that's frankly a heck of a lot cheaper, but also because it's much easier to remove from the slot without having to hook under the head with a fingernail. I'm going to put the original toothpick back in, and I've bought a biro to go in the other side. I'll put a link down in the description. You can get them in all sorts of places. And on the other side, I'm going to put the original tweezers back into the knife. I think that makes a knife that's not just good as new, but is even better than new. That's how I've customised my Swiss Army knife. And I do find the pin, the pen, the fluorescent scales, and even that little screwdriver that you can attach to the corkscrew really helpful. And that screwdriver, if good for nothing else, is perfect for tightening up the screws on my glasses, which are often sat perched on the top of my head. It's a really useful bit of kit. A quick word to the wise. In the UK, I think we often hear about knives being demonised, but I don't think anyone intends that, at least I hope they don't, to cover such a useful tool as a Swiss Army knife. And it is perfectly legal in the UK to carry a folding, non-locking blade under 3 inches in length to most places. There are a few places that are an exception, places like schools, etc. And I'll put a link down in the description below where you can satisfy yourself that that's the case. And honestly, these things are tools, need to be thought of and treated like that, and there is no reason why we shouldn't have a pocket knife in our pocket when we live this kind of life. If you've enjoyed today's video, can you spare us 5 seconds? Give us a thumbs up down below. If you'd like to know more about the kind of tools that we find useful in living this life, whether it's the torch in my pocket or what kind of spade I think is best, let us know in the comments. We'll try and make those videos for you. And if you want to see those videos and everything else we produce on our self-sufficient life, click on subscribe down there and the bell next to it. It's a free service and it lets you know every time we upload a new video. For today, thanks for joining us. Come back and see us soon. Take care.